Hello, I'm Brenda with Blessings and Bread. Welcome to my kitchen. Today is the second day of September and Labor Day. And today, to celebrate, I'm making an apple pie. I always think of apples in September because I know we're getting a fresh new crop of apples in the grocery store that I can go and pick up. And I love to make lots of different apple dishes. So that's what I hope to share with you several times throughout this month, some of my favorite apple dishes. But today I'm just making a Dutch apple pie. And I hope you'll enjoy this video. And if you would like to subscribe to my channel, just hit the subscribe button. I'm having a good time coming on this journey, and I hope you'll join me and come along with me. It's a kind of a new adventure, so I hope you'll join me. But now let's get started on making a Dutch apple pie. A Dutch apple pie is different because instead of a top crust, it has a streusel on top. And I love this recipe. I've always loved apple pies and I love pie crust. But ever since I found this recipe, I have used this recipe to make an apple pie. All right, so we're going to get started. And that apple pie was put on agriculture.com by somebody named Shelby McCready. Shelby McCready, I'm making your apple pie. All right, so we're going to make this apple pie streusel part in the food processor. And I'm going to start with 1 cup of all-purpose flour. And then it's a half a cup of brown sugar. And I'm using light brown sugar. I normally just buy light brown sugar, but either light or brown will work. And I'm going to just pulse this a couple of times to mix the sugar and the flour. All right, now I'm going to add a half a cup of chilled butter. And I've already cut the butter into little tiny cubes to kind of help this go a little faster. So then I'm just going to put this in with the flour and the sugar. And then I'm going to just kind of pulse this a few times till the butter is mixed in. I want to leave a little bit of a chunkiness, like you would if you were making maybe a pie crust. All right, so the streusel seems to be done, and I'm just going to leave this sitting here until we get the second part done. Now, part 2, let me get this out of our way. The next part is also very easy. An apple pie is truly an easy pie to do. The hardest part is peeling and slicing the apples, which I've already done. And my recipe really only calls for 4 cups of apples, but my pie plate is so deep that if I only use 4 cups, it's a really skinny pie. So I do 6 cups of apples, but then I just increase the amount of sugar and flour I need for the amount of apples that I have. So for me, I'm doing 6, but the recipe actually calls for 4. My pie plate is 10 inches, so the recipe is probably more for an 8 or 9 inch pie. So I'm going to put into my bowl my apple slices, and just to show you, I like to slice my apples super, super thin. That way I think they bake better and they'll get done better in the amount of time they bake. All right, so the apples go in, and then next I'm going to add my sugar, the flour, and the sugar. How much sugar? I believe it was a cup of sugar. It was a cup of, if you're using 4 cups of apples, it would be a cup, but I'm using 6. So that was a cup and a half of sugar. And I'm just going to kind of stir that in a little bit. And then I'm going to sprinkle the flour. And the flour is, it calls for 3 tablespoons. Since I'm using 6 cups, mine is 4.5 tablespoons. So depending on how many apples you use will determine how much sugar and flour. And before I even stir that, I'm going to go ahead and add my cinnamon. And the cinnamon is really the only flavoring in my pie. I don't like nutmeg a whole lot. You could spice your pie up ever how you like, but I just stick to cinnamon, and that's how this recipe was. It calls for 1/4 of a teaspoon. So I'm going to do 1/4 of a teaspoon and a little extra since I did some extra apples. So maybe just not a whole another 1/4, but part of one. All right, about that much. And then salt, it calls for 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, which isn't very much. Let me wipe off my teaspoon before I put it in the salt. I'm just going to reuse that. It calls for 1/8 of a teaspoon, so I'm not going to do quite a 1/4. A little more than 1/8, but not quite a 1/4. But a little salt always in a dessert kind of balances out the sweet. All right, now we're just going to stir that till that's really mixed well. So just take a little bit of stirring. Like I said, I'm kind of separating my apples here. So all that sugar, so all the apples get a little sugar and a little flour gets mixed in well, a little cinnamon all over. Of course, as these apples cook, they'll make some juice. Some of that juice will come out of those apples. And that will help to give a great flavor to your pie. Make it nice and delicious. All right. You want to keep stirring till all that sugar is kind of, I don't want to say attached, but maybe that is the right word, till covered, till all the apples are covered with some sugar. And I don't want like sugar left in the bottom of the pan bowl. I just want it all sticking to an apple somewhere. All right, I think I've got it. Okay. And now I'm going to put all that aside. And I'm going to bring my pie crust that I've already made. Now, when you're making an apple pie, you do not pre-bake or blind bake the crust. So this crust is still raw. And the next step is just to put the apples into the pie plate. All right. So you can see my pie is nice and full. Of course, probably these apples will shrink a little bit as they cook. So they'll cook down a little bit. So just get them nice and even in your pie plate. And then I'm going to just sprinkle the streusel on top of the apples. So I'm just going to kind of do this with my hand, and I just want to evenly spread the apples around. I mean the streusel of the apples. Spread this streusel all around and cover the top of the pie. And I did not increase my streusel. I only increased the apples and the amount of ingredients that went with my apple that was for the apples. I did that once before and increased the streusel. And what happened was I came out with a really juicy pie. And the best thing I could figure out that had gone wrong was that by adding extra streusel, it made too much juice because there was too much sugar. And so this time I am not doubling or increasing the amount of streusel. And next, all we have to do is put this pie in the oven at 350 degrees for an hour. I'm going to cook it on a pan that I've prepared, just so in case it's boiling over in the oven. I have my cookie sheet here with a piece of parchment paper on it, and that'll make that in case it bubbles over at all. And before I put it in the oven, I am going to take my pie guard, and I'm going to place this around the pie, and it just comes together perfectly on the side. This will keep the edges of the pie crust from burning while the apples in the pie are baking. So and I might check about 10 minutes before it's done, and if the pie crust hasn't cooked, I can remove this and kind of let the edges of the crust bake at that time. So we're going to put this in the oven, and we'll be back when it's done to see how it looks and how it tastes. Well, hello. It's about 9 o'clock. The pie's been done for quite a while, and it's been sitting here cooling while I went to the church tonight to a great ladies' meeting. We had a craft night, so we made these pumpkins tonight at our ladies' craft dinner, and we had a great barbecue. And I want to shout out to Tillman for making the barbecue. It was delicious, and I will say before I cut the pie, these 2 pumpkins came from our yard. And last year when I threw out my pumpkin after the holidays, the pumpkin plant came up volunteer. But then my husband and son have been nursing them and watering them. And this is just today we got the 4th or 5th pumpkin off of those. And we've even got an orange one out there growing too. So different plants. So kind of blessed with some pumpkins we didn't plan on having. And now we're going to cut this pie and see if it turned out. I will say, as I'm cutting it, that I went ahead and cooked it an extra 10 minutes. So it cooked for an hour and 10 minutes. And I guess I just felt like because it had the extra apples in there, it might have needed some extra time. It was, a little bit hard to tell, but I would use a fork and kind of test. Let's see if I can get that out without my crust falling apart. I don't know. That looks like the crust might want to be sticking to the bottom of the pan. No, it came out. All right. It does look delicious. I could not convince anybody to come be my taste tester. So I'm going to have to be my own taste tester. I think I've got a bunch of camera shy people around here. So let's just see. Oh my goodness. I love apple pie, so I think it's going to be delicious. And I skipped dessert at the dinner tonight so I could have a piece of apple pie. Oh my goodness, that gets 2 thumbs up. Turned out just like it should. This is a great recipe. I hope you'll try it out. I want to thank you for coming today and watching my video. And I hope you'll try this recipe out. And then the next time in my kitchen, I hope you'll come back. So I will see you the next time I'm in my kitchen, on my porch, or in my garden.